Good evening and welcome to the People's View. My name is Bill Ohm. I'll be your host for this edition of the People's View for April 18th, 2019. With me today is my friend and colleague, the Honorable Don LeBrun, who served a number of terms in the House as well as Alderman for Nashville Ward 9. Welcome aboard, Don. Ward 5, correct. I was Ward 9.
Thank you, Bill. Glad to be here.
So the topic today is the budget. Where we are in the budget is that the governor's proposed a budget to the House. The House has passed that along to the Senate, and now the Senate is analyzing the budget in terms of what they think is reasonable and what other adjustments should be made. Now, the budget has some good news and some bad news to it. The good news is that the revenue forecast coming out of Ways and Means, House Ways and Means, looks pretty good. It was a bipartisan resolution, all Republicans, all Democrats coming up with the numbers. And the numbers are strong because we've had a good economy, we've had some tax cuts, we've had good business in New Hampshire. The revenue is up about $1 billion from the last biennium to this biennium. So we have a good news situation. We have a chance to take care of the projects that might have been delayed, as well as fund some additional projects. But the bad news is that in the House Democrats on finance increased taxes and spent another $300 to $400 million beyond the budget. And that's the dilemma that the Senate's going to have to face. So Don, we got quite a problem on our hands here. How do you deal with a situation where the Democrats want to spend $300 million to $400 million that we don't have? And they want to raise taxes to do that.
Well, the Family and Medical Leave Act, that's a tax. Nobody can deny that that's a tax.
Right.
And it's a substantial tax, and it has no opt-in or opt-out to it. You have to join the program.
Right. And I think that's the tax that's, as you say, is mandatory.
Right.
And that's a payroll tax on everybody who's working. Mm-hmm. Well, a payroll tax on all the workers is an income tax.
That's right.
So the Democrats want to do this income tax now that's going to just be a little bit right now. But if there's ever any need for additional spending, they're just going to say, well, let's just crank it up a little bit like Maine did and like Connecticut did.
Right. The current program is unsustainable at 0.5%. So it's going to be cranked up. Before you know it, it'll be 1.5, 2, 3, 4, whatever. It'll just keep increasing in order to sustain itself.
And the sad part about it is the governor had proposed a Family Leave Act that's through an insurance plan that's self-funding,
right,
tied into Vermont,
right.
And now it gets blown away. I just can't understand that.
I guess it's just the attitude right now. We're in power. We're in the majority. It's going to be our way and nobody else's way. So obviously the governor's plan was just shot down.
Yeah.
It included, his budget request included no new taxes of any kind, none whatsoever, does not raise fees, no fees are raised, assumes modest revenue growth based on conservative economic projections, it's fiscally responsible, inserts no political agenda, all good things, all things that benefit residents of New Hampshire, all the residents of New Hampshire. But for whatever reason, they came into a windfall of revenue, and rather than come up with a decent program and figure out how to utilize that money in a wise way, they just decided, well, there's a lot of money there, let's find a way to spend it.
Yeah. And the other thing that really bothers me from the Ways and Means standpoint, I used to be in the tax committee, mm-hmm. Ways and Means, mm-hmm. is that we had put a 4-year program in place to cut business taxes a little bit, mm-hmm. So we become more competitive in the Northeast because we had pretty high business taxes.
It's on the BET and BPT.
Exactly right.
Yeah. And what did they do?
They knocked out
They repealed that and increased it.
Yeah. I mean, from a planning standpoint, I used to run a business. You want to have some certainty on what your tax situation is going to be down mm-hmm. the road, and we provided that.
Right.
And now with the change to the Democrats in the House and the Senate, it looks like that certainty is tossed out the window, and it's now up for grabs again. So how's the business going to plan if they want to plan to expand in New Hampshire, which is what we want. Now they have to think about it. Well, is my business model for expansion going to be sustainable, or do I have to look at some other state? So
Well, they've also taken. We all know the government's too big.
good point.
We know very well it's too big, regardless if it's state, local, or what it is.
Yes.
It's too big, and they have all sorts of programs in here that they've created or that they've increased that hire more people.
Yeah.
We don't need more people hired. We've got too many people in government now. We can cut, for instance, HHS. We can cut that by 30% right off the top, and still function the same as we are now.
I mean, a good point with HHS, for example, you could talk about how many people are in the buildings in Concord versus how many people are caseworkers, helping the folks, helping the families, helping the kids. The governor's proposal, which I thought was pretty interesting, said, look, I'm going to fully fund the development disabled wait list for the next 2 years, fully fund it, no wait list anymore.
Right.
And I'm also going to put 62 new positions in the Division of Children, Youth, and Families. So our most vulnerable kids
We
have a
actually
support
approved
network.
66, but he came up with the number of 62. I'm not going to argue over 4 people.
Maybe 4 administrators and
But
2
this is a
caseworkers.
place where we needed additional employees.
Yes.
This was a place that was hurting badly. We had caseworkers that were going out and actually recording the case with pencil and paper. We appropriated computers for these people so that what they put in when they're on the scene goes into the system. They don't have to go back to the office and rewrite it. And that's what they were doing before. It was double work. It went on for years and years. And we finally rectified that situation.
Yeah, because you spent a lot of time on HHS down. You were the vice chair.
Absolutely.
You got to see all the issues that came before it.
Yeah.
You'd think with that being probably the biggest part of our budget, and now having extra money going into
47%,
HHS,
yeah.
we could really be effective in managing those caseloads.
I think we're reaching effectiveness now when all these provisions that we approved 2 years ago are in place, providing the current majority doesn't in some way cut them, repeal them, whatever. If what we proposed 2 years ago goes through, we'll have the 62 new caseworkers. They'll have the equipment they need to do the job the way that it should be done, with ease and perfection, I guess is the way to address it. We appointed or approved a ombudsman, Miss Myra O'Neill, who is doing a tremendous job to oversee the caseload and assess each case to make sure that the case is being handled properly so that we don't have the unfortunate situation that we had 6 years ago, was it, when the 2 children were abused and killed.
Yeah, better oversight. Let's talk a little bit about some of the budget impact on the city of Nashua. The governor's proposed to do some one-time aids across the board, and Nashua's being the second largest city would get a good chunk of that additional aid. Back in 2010, when you and I were first elected, we had this horrible $800 million deficit, and things that had been planned on had to be cut, and one of those items was school building aid. So the governor has proposed a $63 million fund to return money back to the cities and towns for school building aid. I think Nashua would get a good chunk of that. The governor's proposed an increase in special education of about 20%. Now we can argue how effectively that program is, but it's a mandated program, and so the governor's proposing to be more than generous, I think, to the kids who are needing additional help with that increase. The piece that I like talks about the career and technical education expansion. You know, not everybody's going to be, a business executive in the sense of being a corporate chairman. A lot of people like to work with their hands. A lot of people are good on the street.
There's nothing wrong with that.
It's the backbone of our economy, the small business.
In fact, we're in need of those people right now.
Right.
We can't fill the positions we have.
Yeah. Can you find a plumber without white hair? I can't find one.
You can't. Or pants that fit.
I think that comes with the trend.
But the problem that I have with the education system is, especially here in Nashua, everything is geared toward the public school system.
Yeah.
Charter schools, for instance, they have proposed that no charter school can get over $30,000 in grant aid. They put a cap on it. Charter schools are educating children better than the public schools for 1/3 of the money, little less than 1/3 of the money
Yeah.
that it costs. Why? Because you don't have the union influence that you have in the public schools, which is where the money is eaten up. You've got 4 different unions, I believe it is, within the public school system. And each one of them, each one as their contract is up, of course they want more money than the last one got. If you gave this one $10, we want 11. Then you give that one 11, this one wants 12. And it just keeps going up and up and up. So all this money pouring into the public school systems is eaten up by unions.
Well, wouldn't school choice then be an answer to that? If you gave the parents a voucher and say, look, go anywhere you want. Go to your local public school, go to a parochial school, go to a charter school, or homeschool. Wouldn't that be a better answer than
Absolutely,
requiring
providing the money followed the student.
Right.
But that's what they're against. They want to keep the money. The student can go wherever, but they want to keep the money.
So you got an empty classroom,
But they've got the money.
but they got the money. Yeah, that sounds like a huge, huge problem across the board.
And it's a proven fact. The charter schools, for instance, are doing a much better job of educating students than the public schools are. I mean, that's a fact.
Yeah. I know in New York City there's I think a 27 student wait list, 27,000 student wait list to get into a charter school.
I have no doubt.
And the ones that go there come out, and these are low income folks. They're not the greatest family life, but they found that the charter school could take a person of any background and bring them right to the top in terms of,
Charter schools have students in them whose family is under the poverty level.
yeah.
It's not that these are all the elite, which is what certain factions of our population wish to impose upon you. That's not so.
Yeah. You brought up earlier the topic of our education tax credits in New Hampshire for the folks who can't afford to go to a private school on their own. So we have this tax credit program that
This tax scholarship
tax
program.
scholarship, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was involved with the introduction to that program,
I know you were.
and it was set up in a way that you could not benefit personally from contributions.
Right.
You could contribute, but you can't say my kid's in the program.
Right.
In fact, if your kid was from a wealthy family, he didn't qualify for the program.
That's right.
But they would take donations, and for kids of a certain income level and less, that would be a means to let them get an alternative education from a traditional school.
But my understanding is that that program's been repealed.
That's what I heard.
Yeah.
Now that has to go. So the House repealed it. Bill's got to go to the Senate, and I hope the governor will veto that repeal because it's one of the
Or
best
somehow
programs we have.
influence its reinstatement.
Yeah, well, it's
Something has to be
yeah.
done. I mean, you've got a really good working program there.
Yeah.
And what is the reasoning behind it? They give no reasoning behind it. They just don't like it.
Well, the real reason is what you brought up earlier is I think it's a union issue, and they're worried about union jobs if there's competition, and this is a potential threat to the schools. I mean, even if you said we're not going to do any of the union topics, we'll just give the kids a voucher. I would think that would make the schools a little more ambitious about tuning themselves up because you're going to be losing students and that school's going to close eventually if you can't compete with the other schools in the city.
As a society, doesn't it make sense that we have well-educated people graduating from our schools, regardless of what school it is, graduating from our schools that are going to take over and move things forward? Doesn't that make a lot of sense?
Absolutely. It's the
Or am I
backbone of our...
cuckoo?
No, it's common sense time. So there's a lot of opportunity. Going back to the governor's thought, and think about students again. The governor proposed a new $32 million student loan assistance program. Now, we know how expensive it is to go beyond high school into college, and that's a whole nother topic of why it has to be so expensive. But I think if you recognize the fact that for some kids, it's the right answer for them. It's not trade school. It's a regular four-year college. But now you graduate, and you've got $100,000 in debt. Holy mackerel. I mean, you're going to be in the hole for a long time paying that off.
Bill, my answer to that is go to a school you can afford. When I went to school, I could afford a community college.
Yeah.
That's where I went. I didn't go to Stanford or Harvard or one of those that had come out with $400,000 debt. I went where I could afford.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to do.
I went to one of those schools and wound up with $30,000 in debt, but I was able to pay that off in 2 years because I had a good job. But it's not a easy situation.
Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way for everybody.
Yeah, I got technical stuff, so I got a technical job. If I had a job in, say, gender studies or something like that, the only job you're going to get is at a university or a government, and you're not really very marketable in the real world of product development or service technology of some sort. It's
yeah. But we have a need right now for tradesmen.
Yeah.
We can't fill the jobs. Automobile mechanics, plumbers, electricians.
Yeah.
They are all begging for
Yeah.
qualified people.
Yeah.
And we just don't have the people coming out.
Yeah. Well, hopefully the money going to career and technical education will help the state expand those opportunities for the kids. And if they have to take out a loan, we got a loan program that'll help them out.
Yeah. But all in all, what I keep preaching to the choir. We have got to learn to work together. We've got to learn that not every idea is based on which party came up with it. We've got to understand that both sides can come up with good ideas. Let's debate the issue and come up with a resolution.
Yeah.
In the military, you go to your company commander. You say, I've got a problem. Do you know what he's going to do to you? He's going to stomp you down, and he's going to tell you, don't ever come to me again with a problem unless you have a solution.
Right.
And that's the way everything works. You don't just say, I have a problem. Sure, you have a problem. What have you done to try to rectify that problem? Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
That's what legislatures have to do.
Yep. Thinking about politics and working together, there's an old saying in politics is that you can get a lot done if you're willing to let somebody else take the credit for it.
Oh, well, I can answer to that, I'm telling you.
Yeah, you and I were some of the grunts at our committees.
I got a lot done when it came to Medicare expansion, or Medicaid expansion. And I got all the credit for it for about 6 months. And then other people started taking all the credit for it.
Yeah. So, but that's part of working together, when, if you have a good idea, like at our committees, for example, we like to have the committee have a good report. Everybody in the committee backs that report.
Yeah.
It's a group ownership topic.
It's good when a vote comes out of committee, 19-2 or 21-0 or something like that. That shows unity.
Yeah.
And that's what you need. That's the only way you benefit all of the people all of the time is if you have unity.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about what's coming up now. So the state of the situation is that, say the budget, is that the governor's run it through his agencies. Mm-hmm. It was run through the House where they made these changes, and now it's going into the Senate. Now, Senate Finance is Senator D'Alessandro, who I think is a pretty common sense guy.
He is. I've worked a lot with, I call him Papa Lou.
Yeah, he's the dean of the Senate.
Yeah.
Personally, he's a wonderful gentleman.
Yeah.
He'll shake your hand, look in the eye, and give you a straight answer. So I'm hoping that with Senator D'Alessandro now in control of the budget, that the Senate will take a deep breath and take a look at some of the unusual changes that the House might have made and may go back to more what the governor's proposed, which is using the windfall in money, this extra $1 billion, which may not be there in 2 years,
Yeah.
and try to use that for some of the urgent problems that are one-time appropriations and not reoccurring ones. Because if we get locked into spending $1 billion more forever and things slow down a little bit, then we're going to be in deep trouble like we were back in our first terms done. So that's what I'm hoping. But then the ultimate check on both of that's going to be the governor. If it comes out of the Senate, that's not in a workable format.
Well, you know the governor's going to be against all the increases in taxes, the establishment of new taxes, the raising of the fees. I mean, every fee imaginable is proposed to be raised in this budget.
Yeah.
I mean, even the DMV, if you go to DMV and need records, they've even increased the fees for what you'll pay for your records. I mean, some of the things are really petty. Other things are extreme.
Yeah. So why is that? I mean, if you kind of look at negotiating theory, the whole idea is to be outrageous in your request, so you wind up getting a little more than you would if you were reasonable. And maybe that's the approach that the Democrats are taking right now.
It's more money to spend.
Yeah.
And that again is the opposite way to look at things.
Yeah. But if they're unreasonable, and it's clearly unreasonable, then the governor, I think, would certainly have a lot of support saying, I'm going to veto that. We're not going to go through these extraneous expenditures.
Which defers us back to the previous budget.
Yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, Don, isn't that a good idea? I mean, if we just flatline the budget, I would think that's better than overspending.
Absolutely.
And if we flatline the budget, then we could see if we can really live with some of these constraints without having any expenditures increased.
I agree. You're 100% right.
And I think we saw some of that when Governor Hassan had vetoed what I thought was a pretty good budget. But she was a one-term governor planning on running for Senate. And I think this whole veto thing was a questionable act just to try to get some traction in her Senate campaign. But we just sat on it. We in the House said, okay, Governor, we disappointed that you didn't accept our budget, so we can wait.
Yeah.
And we waited and we waited. And then finally the governor said, well, you know, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Senate President, you know, maybe I could do something with
She
this.
finally sat down and negotiated a little bit.
And basically she basically gave us the budget that we'd proposed.
Right.
So I'm hoping that if we do hit an impasse, what I think is very likely right now, that the Senate President and the House Speaker will sit down with the governor and say, look, guys, you got $1 billion, $1 billion more money to spend. Don't make it $1.3 billion, $1.4 billion. Keep it $1 million.
But don't look at it like you've got $1 billion to spend.
Well,
Look at it like you've got $1 billion. Now let's come up with a plan of what's needed.
Yeah.
And let's spend it wisely.
Yeah.
Not just, we've got $1 billion, how do we spend it?
Yeah. I have a proposal for the extra $300 million or so, whatever that might be, which is to the
3 to 4 million, 100 million, whatever.
Yeah. And that proposal is the pension deficit. You know, some of our softball players are former teachers, and they sure they talk to you like they talk to me about not getting COLAs and not getting an increase. And I tell the folks, you know, I'd love to do something for you, but the pension deficit is almost $5 billion in the hole.
Yeah.
And it hasn't gotten any better. In fact, it's gotten worse in the last 10 years. If that pension system was fully funded, which it used to be, if it was fully funded, instead of having $5 billion in the hole, that was paid off, 7% of $5 billion is $350 million extra we would have year after year after year to be more generous to our retirees. So why don't we just start to pay that down, and maybe a $300 million
That's an
deposit,
excellent idea.
and then we can start to be more generous over
Yeah.
time to these long-term public employees who,
And
back in the
that
day,
would be utilizing money wisely.
yeah, because back in the day they didn't get much of a pension. Now they're getting a pretty big pension, but back in the day,
Oh, yeah.
25
Hardly
years ago,
ever.
you know, they're hurting.
Hardly ever. And their lifetime insurance and everything that
best
goes along
amount
with
of-
it. Yeah. No, they're doing very well.
So that's what I would recommend to the governor.
But But
if the,
what about the rainy day fund also?
well, that's,
I mean,
yes.
you've got to always, in your household budget, you always have to have a certain amount that you can fall back on for an emergency.
Stuff happens.
It does, very much so. I wasn't going to say quite that way, but yes, it does happen.
It's the S
But-
word.
Yeah. But, you've got to have that fund to fall back on in case of an emergency. And it just doesn't seem, and I hate saying Republicans or Democrats, but the legislature currently does not seem to realize that stuff does happen, that there should be money there in case those things happen. They just seem to think that as long as there is money laying around, we have to find a way to spend it.
Yeah, there's a hole in their pocket, and it.
Yeah.
Well, it's up the hole. You know?
Just like the increase all the increases they propose in employment opportunities. I mean, that's because they think they have some money to spend. They're not needed. Anybody knows that government is too big and does not need more employees.
Yeah, it spends too much.
Yeah.
Well, I think, as we used to say, the solution to low spending is don't bring the money in, cut the taxes.
Yeah.
And I think on that note, Don, I want to thank you so much for our great discussion here
finished
on the
already?
budget. Well, we're just starting.
We could go on for a long time.
We could. So I'd like to thank our viewers for watching this segment. If you've got a concern about the budget, talk to your senators, talk to your representatives. This bill is now in the Senate, and it's a long way from being completed. So
And it's HB 1 and HB 2.
HB 1 and 2. So take care, folks. See you next time.
Good job, Bill.